Hey there passengers, welcome aboard this Chalupa Airlines flight. Today I'll be talking to you about what it's like running Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 with the best hardware in 2021, the 5950X CPU and the Asus Strix 3090 overclocked graphics cards, the two best components. I've got 32 gigabytes of 4000 megahertz RAM and I'm running it at 3600 megahertz. And I've also got the game installed on a Samsung QVO 4TB SSD. To give you a basic rundown of how this game runs, I've got it currently maxed out, every slider to the max, and in most situations I'm getting between 50 and 60 frames per second. In very high detail areas, such as this area I'll be showing you at Chicago today, you'll probably get between 30 and 50. Just due to the fact that you're rendering every single object. Everything's got a shadow, reflections, clouds, so much detail. And the living airport environment to go along with that. You see the planes landing and taking off. So I'll be running through a quick flight here around the Chicago area, showing you what the best processor and best graphics card can do to this game for 2021. Getting about 50 frames, 48 frames, between 40 and 50, upper 40s for Chicago Midway. Going to take off, head towards Chicago O'Hare, and we'll see how the frame rate is in this fully loaded high detail area. I'm also in the Aerosoft CRJ 700, a very high detail aircraft, and it's so much fun to fly, very realistic. High resolution cockpit. And we're rolling at about 43 frames per second. Frame rates in the mid-40s, going to head up towards the 50s as we leave the airport. Airports have the most demanding areas for your CPU and GPU just because they render so many high detail objects, especially in this flight simulator. Flight Simulator 2020 is the most advanced, and it's pushing the limits of the best hardware. We're going to bank towards Chicago O'Hare. I'll do a landing at Chicago O'Hare, and then later on we'll do some night flying, and I'll show you how that impacts the CPU and GPU as well. Which I found the impact is minimal, the difference at least with the best hardware. The frame rate tends to be the same. The big question on most people's minds when you're thinking about buying the best hardware to run this game is, will I be able to run it at 60 frames or more all the time? I think we've sort of answered that question in that this is a beast of a system, but at maxed out settings, you can get 60 frames. You can get more than 60 frames. In high detail areas, I think you're going to get between 30 and 50. What matters most, though, is your experience. Are you okay with just seeing the game being smooth? Because it's certainly smooth at max settings. As in, there's no hiccups. You might see a couple frame rate drops when you get into really high detail airports, but the smoothness still remains. So you have to ask yourself, are you okay with smoothness versus getting a beautiful 60 frames or more every time? And when I bought this hardware, I thought I would be blowing this game out of the water in terms of getting over 60 frames all the time maxed out. That's not going to be the case. You're going to get 60 frames a lot of the time, but you're not going to get it all the time. And that's what Flight Simulator does to PCs. Don't you find that whenever a new flight sim comes out, the PC hardware industry has to figure out how to make their cards and processors better so that you can play this game maxed out. That just happens over time. Remember when Flight Simulator X came out and the PCs weren't quite equipped at the time to handle that maxed out. Now, it's a breeze. The level of detail you're rendering here in 2020 is every building, every piece of grass. The water looks phenomenal. The clouds are so realistic. And the cloud shadows too. O'Hare is straight ahead. And I'll do a landing there, turn around, face the terminal, show you where some of the key FPS drops are. Right now getting about 53 frames, 50 frames. I've also got VSync turned on, so I don't have the computer working harder when it doesn't need to. And it's capped at 60 frames, so I won't get above 60 frames, but I don't want my components to overwork when it's not necessary. At 60 frames, you're getting plenty of smoothness. And something that has really made my game much smoother is getting a monitor with a high refresh rate. Because even at lower frame rate rates, when you get into the 30s and the 40s, it looks so smooth that you won't notice it too much. But if you have a monitor with a 60 Hertz refresh rate, you'll see a lot less smoothness, and the game can appear to be a little jittery, or frame by frame, at least when compared to a high refresh rate monitor, which I'm using one that's got 165 Hertz. And it's also running at a resolution of 1440p, so that does stress out the graphics card more than 1080. Keep that in mind though when you're purchasing equipment for this game. Alright, let's put the landing gear down. Should be getting close to runway 28 center. Sight. This is a fun plane to hand fly. Regional airliners are so much fun. Landing. Right now I'm getting about 36 frames per second landing in Chicago, and this is one of the high detailed airports that comes with, I think it's the premium kit or the deluxe. I think it's premium. One of those add-on packages that you can get, the basic and the deluxe and the premium, I think they are. Alright, 34 frames per second, max detail, Chicago O'Hare. Every object is rendered. Traffic density is set to 50%. That's default. That's their ultra setting. I don't have it set more than that just because I'm sure it would tax the CPU and GPU more than necessary. And at 50%, the game looks great. 50% traffic. Alright, 30 frames right here. Getting 29. That's my lowest one yet. .34 frames. So whenever you start looking at the buildings, look out the left window, there's 23 frames, 27, 29. I think that 23 was just a low from snapping my view over. If I'm looking at the buildings in general, just taxiing to one of these areas, I'm getting 30 frames. And I can hear my computer working harder. Fans are going up, obviously, as it gets hotter. This is about the lowest I'll see my FPS get in this game. 29, 30, which is great. I think that's great. That's so playable. If you're maxing every little setting out, including anti-aliasing. I seem to get my low 23 number when I pan around quick. So when I snap to a view, getting about 36, 29 frames there. The cockpit does decrease the frame rate because there's a lot of systems you're rendering. If you are building a PC for this game, make sure that you get a really good cooling system setup in place. I know they recommend a liquid cooler for the 5950X. You don't need a liquid cooler. I'm using the Noctua DH15, which keeps the CPU running, maxing out usually 85. I have yet to tune the fans for that, but this is the most stressful application that my PC runs. Let's turn it to night now. And you'll get to see just how cool, oh, I just knocked that truck out. Just how cool this sim looks at night. Now, airport lighting, that's weird to me. I think you'd see more lights. Sounds like a game glitch. In terms of lighting, though, this is spectacular. And the city lighting is out of this world. So my frame rate, though, when switching to night lighting, is no different than daylight. Let's just do a nice takeoff here. Don't need all the runway. Still averaging about 30. I've seen some videos with people running the 5950 and the 3090 together, and they're in New York City and they're running at 55, 60 frames. Well, that's when they're running it over the city itself, not the airports. The airports are the most demanding parts of this game, rendering the airports. Especially the ones that have been handcrafted, they have the most detail. Like this one has been handcrafted by, what's it, like Orbex or Aerosoft, one of those companies. So every little detail is rendered here. When you go out to some airport in small towns and small cities that don't have high detail airports, you're going to find 50 to 60 frames, 40 frames, pretty attainable. And I'm doing this while recording a video too. Keep in mind that in the background that my GPU is recording this, so that does have an impact on performance. Alright, let's take off. This is what those regional airliners do. They just turn it and burn it. They want you to get off the runway quick. Alright, we're rolling. 22 frames there, 27, 30. It only happens when I pan views, it slows down. That's pretty normal. There's a bus crossing while I'm taking off. Just got out of the way. Okay. We're in the air. Alright, 35 frames. As we leave the airport, it's going to go back up to, I think, that 50 range. Alright, we'll keep her pretty low. Every little house has a light. And the lights are so realistic. Cars on the road. Look at all those lights. All those street lights. That's a beautiful sight. The lights are rendered out into the distance more than in the past. And that light view distance is the level of detail distance. Look at that interchange down there. All traffic lights. And the lights even reflect off of the ground, meaning that you can see the light on the ground being projected. There's Midway. And I'm getting about 45 to 50 frames right now. Looking back at O'Hare, 45 to 50 frames. It doesn't have to render all that detail. When you get close, it will render it. I'm gonna land at Midway. Midway's got such a short runway compared to O'Hare. This is a beautiful look, though. Getting 45 frames.
Traffic, traffic.
Forty-two frames. Look at the lighting, though. It's phenomenal. It's so smooth.
500. 400.
Sync rate.
300.
Sync rate.
200.
Sync rate.
100. 50.
Sync rate.
40. 30. 20. 10.
Welcome to Midway. 40 frames per second. Let's turn to the terminal. I don't know why the airport lights are off, like the ones that reflect outward to show you where your gate is. Showing 39 frames while looking at the gates. Parking. Switch back to day so I can see where I'm going. I don't know where the terminal quite is. There we go.
Please remain seated until the aircraft has come to a complete stop.
Look at those clouds. If you're playing this game, you just say half the time, wow. If you're playing in VR, it's even more wow. Now that requires a lot of processing power, more so than just my monitor setup. From what I hear, you're not going to be able to run that maxed out with the best hardware on VR. But that makes sense since the VR resolution is insane. It's a lot more than 4K. Getting 34 frames while taxiing around here. Not a whole lot of traffic compared to O'Hare, so you can see why it's less demanding in this area. Frames looking around. Frames looking at the terminal, no aircraft. I figure about 40 frames here. High densely populated area, looking at all tons of clouds. All systems are on. That's a really good number. It's a lot of work on your PC. So passengers, thanks for tuning in today. To sum up everything, hopefully this video answered some key questions you might have if you're planning on building a PC to run Flight Simulator 2020. I also hope it gives you an idea of what it's like to run with these pieces of equipment, the best CPU, the best GPU, and can you run it maxed out? Yeah, for sure. You can run it maxed out all the way with every slider. I've yet to really try 100% traffic. I'm just going to keep that at 50%. I'm sure that will have an impact. But running as far as visual settings maxed out, it's between 50 and 60 in regular airports that are not so densely populated. Then when you get into the cities, you're looking at, well, what we just saw right here, between 30 and 50. Where the lowest you'll probably get is the mid-20s. As far as smoothness goes, with a good monitor that's got a high refresh rate, you're going to feel the smoothness. You won't feel the drop in frame rate as much as others would if they have a 60 hertz monitor. So get a monitor that's got 144 hertz or more, so you can feel the smoothness and get a good response time on that. I've got a 1 millisecond response time, so it's ultra fast, ultra smooth. So Flight Simulator 2020 continues to push the limits of today's best hardware in 2021, but nonetheless provides a fantastic playing experience for those who want to get maxed out graphics settings at high resolutions. So thanks again for tuning in, passengers, and I look forward to seeing you in a future Chalupa Airlines episode. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this, and I recommend subscribing if you want to join me on any future flights.